If my grandma keeps working like this, will she get sick and not wake up? The boy asked the hotel manager, right there in the middle of the marble lobby, holding out a fistful of coins. The Harrington Grand had that particular kind of silence that only expensive places manage. The kind purchased deliberately, maintained by staff trained never to let their shoes squeak on the polished floors. Every surface in the lobby reflected something. The brass fixtures, the vaulted ceiling, the enormous arrangements of white peonies flown in weekly from British Columbia. It was a place built on the idea that wealth meant effortlessness, and every person who worked there understood, without being told, that the effort must be invisible. Behind the front concierge desk, Vivienne Lachance stood as though she had been positioned there by an architect. Her posture was precise. Her smile was calibrated. She spoke to a guest about restaurant reservations in a voice, so even it barely disturbed the air between them. If you watched her from a distance, you might use words like composed, or graceful, or professional. You would not use the word exhausted, because she had spent years learning to hide that one. Only, the smallest things gave her away, the way her weight shifted to her left foot every 20 minutes to ease the pressure on her right heel. The way she pressed 2 fingers briefly against the underside of the desk when she thought no one was looking, steadying herself through a wave of something she refused to name. The thin strip of medical tape wrapped around her right index finger, flesh-colored, precise, covering the split skin that had opened again this morning when the temperature dropped and the dryness reached her knuckles. She had been working 12-hour shifts for 6 weeks. From his office above the lobby, Cole Whitmore watched the floor through the floor-to-ceiling glass that ran the length of the mezzanine. At 38, he had spent the last 4 years turning the Harrington Grand into the most consistently reviewed luxury property between Toronto and Quebec City. He did not do this by being warm. He did it by being precise. He tracked movement, response time, guest air recovery, the way a captain tracks weather. Not because he cared about the individuals in the storm, but because the storm's outcome depended on managing every variable correctly. When his attention settled on Vivienne Lachance, he noted the weight shift. The 2-finger press against the desk. He pulled up her shift log on the second monitor without changing his expression. 6 weeks of back-to-back doubles. She had not called in sick once. Cole did not feel sympathy. He felt the low, familiar irritation of a system running inefficiently. He made a note. In the service corridor just behind the main lobby, a boy sat on an upturned laundry bin, drawing on the back of a hotel notepad with a pen he had borrowed from the concierge desk. His name was Theo. He was 7, had his grandmother's dark eyes and a gap in his front teeth, and he drew the way children draw when they are trying to solve a problem they can't say out loud. The picture showed 2 figures. The smaller one was himself, round-headed and grinning, with a hockey stick. The larger one was his grandmother. He had drawn her standing, but her body was thinner than the last time he'd tried to draw her, and he had colored her arms in a color that wasn't quite right, too pale, almost gray. He stared at the drawing for a long time. Then he stood up, pocketed his pen, and walked out into the lobby. Cole had come down to check the afternoon turnover when he saw the child. 7 years old, maybe 8, in a winter jacket that had seen 3 hard Canadian winters and was starting to show them. He was standing at the edge of the lobby carpet with the particular uprightness of a child who has decided to be very serious. Cole crossed the floor toward him. "This area is for hotel guests," he said. His tone was not unkind. It was simply the tone of a man who ran a building on clear categories. The boy looked up at him. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a handful of coins, loonies and toonies, a few quarters, and held them out with both hands. "If my grandma keeps working like this," the boy said, "will she get sick and not wake up?" Cole looked at the coins. He looked at the boy's face. His jaw tightened slightly, not from emotion, but from the precise discomfort of a situation that had no category. "Who is your grandmother?" he asked. "Vivienne," the boy said. "She works at the front. She says she's fine, but she's not fine. Her hands hurt and she doesn't sleep." He paused. "She thinks I don't know, but I know." Cole said nothing for a moment. Then, "Where did you come in from?" "The side door," the boy said simply. "I've come before. I know the code." Before Cole could respond, he heard the front desk go quiet. He turned. Vivienne Lachance had seen them. Even from across the lobby, he could watch the color leave her face. She was at his side in under a minute, her hand on the boy's shoulder, her voice controlled and very, very low. "Luke, what are you doing here?" Not a question. A statement of the precise variety that means I am trying not to fall apart. "Mamie," Luke said, I was just asking. I know what you were asking. Vivian looked up at Cole. The composure was still there technically, every feature in its place. But her eyes were doing something complicated, and Cole, who had spent 4 years being very good at reading people, could not quite categorize what it was. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, "I apologize. This won't happen again." Cole looked at her. He looked at Luke, who was still holding out the coins. "Send him to the lounge," Cole said. "Have the kitchen bring him a hot chocolate, then come to my office." She blinked once. "Yes, sir," she said. He did not wait for her to say anything else. The evenings in Vivian LaChance's apartment in Gatineau did not look like the lobby of the Harrington Grand. The floors were old laminate that clicked in 2 places near the kitchen. The light over the stove had been flickering for months. The radiator knocked at 3 a.m., with the reliability of an alarm she hadn't set. She arrived home each night at 11:30, sometimes midnight. She changed out of her uniform in the hallway so the sound of the zipper wouldn't wake Luke, who slept in the second bedroom with his school bag propped against the wall and his hockey cards spread on the dresser. His parents, her daughter and son-in-law, had been in a serious accident on the Trans-Canada in February. Her daughter was recovering. Her son-in-law was still in rehabilitation, month 4 of an uncertain process. Nobody had said the word permanent, but nobody had stopped using careful language either. Vivian had taken Luke in without discussion. There was no one else. What the hotel did not know, because she had not told them, was that she had a second job. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, and every Saturday morning, she cleaned a dental office on St. Joseph Boulevard. The job all paid in cash. She had not told them about the hotel either. She sat at the kitchen table after midnight with her hands in a bowl of warm water and Epsom salts. A trick her mother had taught her for the swelling, and she looked at the stack of papers on the corner of the table. Luke's school fees. A letter from the rehabilitation center with a payment schedule. A notice from the landlord about the rent increase taking effect in 60 days. She lifted her hands from the water. The knuckles on her right hand had cracked again at the second joint. The cold and the repetitive motion of the cash desk had been wearing at them since October, and the skin was raw in a thin, bright line that had not quite closed since the weekend. She pressed a strip of medical tape over it, reached for another. She heard Luke's door open. He came into the kitchen in his socks, his hair standing up on one side, carrying the worn pillow from the chair in his room. Without saying anything, he went to her chair and pressed the pillow against her lower back, the way she had shown him once when she'd thrown out something near her spine moving luggage. She hadn't mentioned it since. He had been doing it anyway. She reached back and put her hand over his small one. Neither of them said anything. The next morning, Cole Whitmore's office was cold in the way offices are cold when the person inside them prefers it that way. Vivian stood in front of his desk with her hands clasped behind her back, covering the new tape on her knuckle. Cole looked up. He took his time. "Vivienne," he said, "you've worked 12-hour doubles for 6 consecutive weeks. The November staffing shortage is being managed," he said. "I'm aware of the shortage. I'm looking at your numbers." He held up a printed schedule. "You volunteered for every additional shift. HR approved them. That's on me for not catching it sooner." Vivienne waited. "I'm taking you off the desk for the next 2 days," Cole said. "Paid. Your shifts are covered." The silence that came after this was the wrong kind. He had expected relief. What he got instead was a very controlled version of panic, crossing a very controlled face. "Mr. Whitmore," she said. Her voice was steady. The steadiness was the tell. "I'd prefer to continue my regular schedule. It's not a negotiation. With respect." She stopped, started again. "A paid absence still goes on the record. If I'm off the floor, there's someone on the floor who isn't me. If there's someone on the floor who isn't me, it becomes easier to imagine the floor without me." She looked at him directly. "I can't afford to become easy to replace." Cole set down the schedule. He looked at her with the expression of a man who has just tried to offer someone water and been told the water is the problem. "I am not replacing you," he said. "I know the business, Mr. Whitmore." She stopped herself again, and for a single second, the composure did something it almost never did. It slipped. "Luke's grandfather's medical expenses come out of this job. The rent comes out of this job. His school fees, his medication, his asthma, all of it." She pressed her lips together. 2 paid days doesn't cover what being forgettable costs. The office went very still. "I'm not firing you," Cole said, and he said it more slowly than he had said anything in recent memory. "The days are paid. Full rate. Nobody is timing how quickly the desk runs without you." She looked at him. A line she had been holding very tightly. for a very long time came slightly loose somewhere behind her eyes. "Paid," she said. "Paid," he confirmed. He looked at his desk, at the immaculate surface, the precise arrangement of things, and for a moment something crossed his face that he did not try to categorize. Take Luke somewhere, a museum, the market. Just go be his grandmother for 2 days. She left without saying anything else. Cole sat in his office for a long time after she was gone. He told himself he would review the Q4 occupancy reports. He opened the file and did not read it. Instead, he found himself driving west along the river on a Thursday afternoon. No particular reason, just not at the hotel for once. He had not left the building before 7 in the evening in 11 weeks. He was not sure what had changed that today he had. He saw them near the Gatineau market, at one of the outdoor tables under the heaters. Vivienne was asleep in a folding chair, her head tipped back, her scarf pulled up around her chin. Even asleep, her right hand was closed into a fist on the arm of the chair. Luke was beside her, eating a beaver tail with both hands, a paper cup of something steaming next to his elbow. Cole pulled over. He sat in the car for a while. He watched the fist that couldn't unclench even in sleep. The skin of her hand was red across the knuckles, even from here, and the tape had started to lift at one corner in the cold. He got out of the car. Luke saw him first and opened his mouth. Cole raised a single finger to his lips. The boy, after a beat, nodded. He pressed back into his chair and went carefully still, watching with very serious eyes. Cole had gone into the market on the way and bought coffee, 2 cups, and a cinnamon pastry in a paper bag. He set the second coffee and the pastry next to Luke without a word and pointed at him. Luke accepted this transaction gravely, like a business arrangement. Then Cole unspooled the scarf from around his own neck. Heavy charcoal wool. The kind of scarf a person buys once and keeps for 15 years, and with a precision he usually reserved for very different tasks. He laid it over Vivienne's right hand, tucking the ends under, so the wind coming off the river wouldn't lift it. She exhaled, once, and the fist loosened by a fraction. He walked back to his car. He sat with his hands on the wheel. The river was gray and flat and enormous, the way it always was this time of year, pressing at the edges of everything. The smell of the car's leather interior faded, replaced by something that was not there, machine oil, the metallic bite of winter in an unheated room, the particular smell of a house where not enough is warm enough. He had grown up in a house like that in Sudbury, the third of 4 children of a man who worked the mines and came home in silence, and a mother who cleaned office buildings from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, and then came home and cleaned their own house too. She had never complained. He had spent the first 32 years of his life believing that not complaining meant everything was fine. She had a heart attack at 59, at the kitchen sink, on a Wednesday morning. He had been in a board meeting in Vancouver. His sister had called him at noon. Cole pressed his forehead to the steering wheel. The woman in the folding chair by the market, with her fist that wouldn't open even in sleep, was not his mother. He knew that. But the thing coiling in his chest didn't know the difference. And after 17 years of being very good at not feeling things in business hours, he was discovering that the chest doesn't keep business hours. He looked up. In the mirror, Vivienne was still asleep. Luke was watching Cole's car with the steady, patient attention of a child who has learned to wait for things to resolve themselves. "I built it," Cole said quietly, into the empty car. "I built the exact kind of place." He did not finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The next morning, the Harrington Grand looked the way it always did, immaculate, golden, humming with the low frequency of expensive things, operating exactly as intended. Vivienne came back from her 2 days with Luke and went to her locker in the staff room. Hanging from the hook above her coat was a heavy charcoal scarf, freshly washed, folded with the kind of care that suggested a dry cleaner had been involved. She stood in front of it for a moment. She touched the wool. The faint smell of cedar and black coffee lingered in the fibers. Just barely, like a room someone had recently left. She understood some things without needing them to be explained. She pulled the scarf down carefully and folded it into her bag. Then she reached into her tote and took out a flat portfolio sleeve. Corners reinforced with electrical tape, the kind of thing assembled from whatever is available when what is available is limited. She had been carrying it back and forth to work for 2 months without opening it in front of anyone. She knocked on the door of Cole's office. "Come in." He was at his desk, not looking at the lobby screens for once. He looked up. "How are you?" he said. It was almost a question. "Better," she said. "Thank you for the scarf." He said nothing. He looked at the portfolio. She set it on his desk. I've been working on something. During nights, I'd like you to see it. He looked at it for a moment without moving. Then he opened it. Inside were drawings, precise, careful drawings, of a hotel front desk. Not the Harrington Grand's desk, which was all marble and sharp angles, and designed to impress arriving guests with a sense of arrival, of crossing a threshold into a world that operated on different terms than the one they'd come from. These drawings were of something else entirely. A redesigned front desk at a height that could be adjusted. Raised for presentation, lowered for long shifts. Anti-fatigue matting integrated into the base, invisible from the guest side. A configuration that allowed staff to alternate between standing and a supported lean without ever sitting down, which no luxury property would allow. A modular drawer system at true elbow height. Small, precise ergonomic details drawn with the kind of knowledge that only comes from standing in one place for 12 hours a day and cataloging exactly what the body costs. Cole was quiet for a long time. "You drafted these at home," he said. "I took a drafting course at Algonquin before Luke came to live with me," she said. "Nights, mostly. I was interested in hospitality design." He looked at the elbow height drawer configuration, then at the matting integration. "The weight distribution here." He pulled the drawing closer. "If the desk surface is at standard height, this support rail is too low to be used without curving the spine. Raise it 4 centimeters, she said immediately. "I've been testing the height at home with a stack of books." He looked at her. "A stack of books," he repeated. "I don't have a drafting table." He pulled the drawing toward him and picked up a pen. "If you raise the rail and extend it here." He began sketching along the margin. His hand moved near hers and stopped, not quite touching. He looked down. The tape on her knuckle had started to flift at the edge again, the skin beneath it red and cracked and recently reopened. He did not say anything about it. He did not offer hollow words. He simply adjusted his angle slightly and kept working on the drawing, and the silence that followed was a different kind of silence. Not the silence of a hotel lobby kept quiet at great expense, but the silence of 2 people looking at the same thing and seeing it the same way. "This is serious design work," he said eventually. "I know," she said. He looked at the full portfolio, 8 drawings, each one building on the last. "Who else has seen these?" "No one." He was quiet for another moment. Then, "I want to put these in front of someone, not as a staff proposal, as a design consultation." He said it the way he said most things, without softening it, without over-explaining. "There's an interior architect I work with on renovations. She advises 3 properties in the Ottawa Valley. If she thinks what I think she's going to think." "Don't," Vivian said. He stopped. "Don't promise me something," she said. "Just show her. That's enough." He nodded once. 3 weeks later, the staff break room at the Harrington Grand received 4 new pieces of furniture, 2 adjustable stools, anti-fatigue mats at every standing station, and a low-profile support rail along the back wall of the concierge desk, installed quietly on a Tuesday morning by a crew who said nothing about who had ordered it or why. "Did the Whitmore actually smile at a contractor yesterday?" One of the front desk staff whispered during a shift change. "He never explains anything," another said. "Did you see the mats, though? My feet, I know." Cole passed through the lobby without stopping. His face was the same, composed, distant, tracking the variables of a well-run system. But Vivian, restocking the courtesy shelf near the entrance, watched him pass and felt something shift in the architecture of how she understood the building she worked in. She was not a component being maintained. She was a person who had been seen by someone who wasn't good at saying so, and who had found the only way he knew to say it anyway. She straightened the concierge penholder. She breathed. For the first time in 6 weeks, her shoulders were not in her ears. The meeting request arrived on a Monday. All department heads, the private dining room, 9 o'clock. The general manager of the parent hospitality group, Harrington and Associates, 4 properties across Ontario and Quebec, was flying in from Toronto. His name was Edmund Voss, and Cole had never once described him as reasonable. Vivian did not go to this meeting. She was on the floor when it happened. She heard about it afterward, in pieces, from different people. The way you hear about a thing that has already changed everything before you knew it was happening. Edmund Voss, it turned out, had been tracking the modifications. The mats, the rail, the adjusted schedule, the 2 paid days during a staffing shortage. He had numbers printed in a folder, the implied cost to brand standard of a personal accommodation, the optics of a guest-facing employee receiving extended time off at full pay during a peak month. He laid it out like evidence. He was very calm about it. Cole, by all accounts, was also calm. The staff changes reduced front desk error rate by 11% in 3 weeks, Cole said. I have those numbers too. That's not the point, Cole. Then what is the point? The point is that you accommodated a staff member's personal circumstances in a way that other staff will notice. When one person gets a day off because their grandchild showed up in the lobby, she didn't get a day off because of the child. Cole's voice was even. She got a day off because she had been working doubles for 6 weeks, and her hands were bleeding through her bandages, and she was still at the desk. I offered her rest, and she was afraid to take it. That is a workplace that operates on fear. I'm not interested in running that. Edmund Voss's jaw tightened. You serve at the discretion of this company, Cole. We have 4 properties and a brand standard to protect. I understand that. Then you'll understand that the board is going to recommend her termination. She has a personal situation that has repeatedly entered the workplace. She has a liability profile. If we let this stand, we signal that the brand is soft. The room was very quiet. Cole was quiet for a long moment too. Long enough that people in the room started to think he was going to say yes. If a grandmother, Cole said, who works 12-hour shifts through a staffing shortage with bleeding hands, who has never once called in sick, who produced serious design work on her own time with a stack of library books. If she is considered a liability, then the standard is the problem. He looked at Edmund Voss. And I'm not interested in protecting it. Voss's expression was the expression of a man calculating. We will replace you. You might, Cole said. He stood. He picked up his folder. But you should know that the designer who produced those front desk drawings has been approached by Fairmont's interior team. If she leaves, she takes the work. And the work is good. He walked out. In the hall, Vivian was waiting. She had not been listening, she told herself, but the walls of the Harrington Grand were not actually very thick. She was pale. She had her hands pressed flat against her thighs. Cole stopped in front of her. He did not offer comfort. He looked at her the way he looked at the floor during an inspection, directly taking inventory. They want you gone, he said. I told them no. Now you need to be in that room. She blinked. I'm not a designer, Cole. It was the first time she had used his name. They both noticed. You drew 8 designs on your kitchen table with library books and a protractor, he said. And a professional architect called them the most practical hospitality ergonomics she'd seen in 5 years. Don't tell me what you're not. He held the folder out to her. Get in there and tell them what it costs to build a place that runs on fear. The boardroom table was long and very cold. 14 faces in expensive suits looked at Vivian Lachance in her concierge uniform, and she felt the particular smallness of being examined by people who believe you don't belong in the room. She spread the drawings across the table. You're looking at this as a staff accommodation, she said. Her voice was steadier than she had expected. I'd like you to look at it differently. Edmund Voss leaned back, waiting. A front desk employee working a 12-hour shift loses an average of 12% accuracy in their final 2 hours, she said. That's not fatigue, that's design failure. We are designing workspaces for the guest experience and leaving the employee experience to whatever the body can absorb. She pressed her bandaged finger to the support rail drawing. This modification costs less per desk than a one-night room upgrade. It recovers that 12%. And it keeps the person on the floor, which is where we need them. The room was listening. She could feel it. Not warmth exactly, but attention. The particular quality of people who work with numbers hearing a number they hadn't considered. This isn't charity, she said, and she said it directly at Edmund Voss. This is operational design. The person standing at a desk for 12 hours is the brand. How that person is holding up at hour 11 is what the guest actually sees. A long silence. Then one of the board members, a woman near the window who had said nothing yet, picked up one of the drawings and looked at it carefully. What's the lead time on the rail modification? 6 weeks, Vivian said. I already priced it. Another silence. A different quality this time. Edmund Voss, very slowly, uncrossed his arms. The project was approved as a pilot for the Ottawa property, with a review at 6 months. It was not announced with fanfare. There was no press release. The modifications went in quietly, the way Cole did most things. What changed was gradual, and then not gradual. Vivian Lachance was appointed 4 months later to a new role, Guest Experience and Workplace Design Coordinator. It was a title that had not existed before. It was invented to fit what she already knew how to do. She still wore her uniform. She still knew every regular guest by name and coffee order. But she stopped going to the dental office on Tuesday nights. She stopped calculating the difference between what she earned and what she owed in the middle of the night. She still worried. She was a grandmother raising a grandchild. She would always worry. But the worry lived in a different register now. It wasn't survival anymore. It was ordinary life, which is a different thing entirely. Luke got a small desk in the corner of the Harrington Grand Staff Lounge, next to the window. Cole had bought it himself, assembled it on a Sunday afternoon, and said nothing to anyone about why it was there. It was a fact that the staff noted and declined to discuss, because they had learned that Cole Whitmore expressed himself in furniture. One Friday afternoon in late February, the light coming through the lounge windows was the long, thin, pale light of a Canadian winter finally thinking about giving way. Luke was at his desk, working on a book report about Terry Fox, his pencil moving with the solemn intensity of a child taking something seriously. Cole came in without his jacket, his sleeves rolled up, a cup of coffee in each hand. He set one on the corner of Luke's desk without being asked, because Luke had recently developed an opinion about hot chocolate and was working his way up to coffee. "Terry Fox," Luke said, without looking up. "Good subject," Cole said. Luke set his pencil down and turned to look at Cole with the evaluating gaze of a child who has spent the past several months forming an opinion about someone and is now prepared to deliver the verdict. "A while ago," Luke said, "I gave you some money, all my loonies and toonies, and I asked you to let my grandma rest." Cole was quiet. "You didn't give her rest," Luke said. "No," Cole said. "I didn't, not the way you meant." Luke nodded slowly, thinking this over. "But she's not tired anymore, and she laughs now. She laughed at the radio this morning." He tilted his head. "So I think you did something right, but I'm not sure what it was." Something moved through Cole's chest, a loosening of something held carefully in place for a very long time. He sat down on the chair across from Luke's small desk. He thought about how to answer a 7-year-old honestly. He thought about his mother, and the kitchen in Sudbury, and all the things he had built without understanding what he was building. "I'm not sure either," he said, "but I'm trying to figure it out." Luke considered this for a moment. Then, apparently satisfied, he picked up his pencil and went back to Terry Fox. Vivienne appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, a sketchbook under her arm, a pen tucked behind her ear. She stopped when she saw them, the man and the boy, the long winter light, the 2 cups of coffee arranged on a child's desk like a small and deliberate act of care. She leaned against the doorframe and didn't say anything. Cole looked up, some distances close in ways that can't be tracked, only noticed after the fact. The professional distance between them had been narrowing for months, replaced by something built out of shared hours and difficult honesty and the specific intimacy of being seen clearly by someone who doesn't do that easily. It was not announced. It did not arrive with ceremony. It was simply there, the way the long light was simply there, quiet and real, and changing things without being asked. "The Rideau Trail," Cole said. "This weekend. The 3 of us." Vivienne raised an eyebrow. "It's February. There's a warming hut at kilometer 4. Lucas' head came up immediately. "Are there snacks at the hut?" "There are snacks at the hut," Cole confirmed. Luke turned to Vivienne. The look on his face was conclusive. She looked from the boy to the man, at the careful and improbable life that had assembled itself in the corner of a hotel staff lounge on a February afternoon, and she smiled the kind of smile that belongs entirely to the present tense. "Okay," she said, "but you're carrying the thermoses."